G'day Doggies fans, it's all things Bulldogs and we're going to talk about some media watch. It's Bulldogs 360. I'm going to let you listen to Buzz Rothfield discuss ridiculously comparing Cronulla with Canterbury and the stability of the Sharks. And it's the retrospective attack to cash in on the Galvin name, which I said was going to be the strategy until the end of the season, and it's played out that whole way. They knew the Bulldogs had a tough run home. They knew the Bulldogs were affected by injury. They knew the Bulldogs were affected by suspensions. They knew that the Bulldogs, when they brought this kid over, were going to have to adjust, and it was going to take time. They knew that the Bulldogs were not going to sign Toby Sexton. They know that Mahoney has been... that whole scenario was bubbling and boiling before a ball was kicked. They know that Lachlan Galvin's not worth $1.2 million. They know that Shane Richardson knew he had no chance of keeping him. They knew and they know that making the finals is all that's important. And that's all you have to do before you start again. And most of them know and predicted that Canterbury wouldn't have the cattle yet in order to compete at the serious end. Yet they attack our coach and our club and our players because it fits a narrative of when you got fans which are upset, when you got the whole NRL basically talking about the Galvin effect and up to nearly, 10 million impressions with most negative about the guy. And he was literally in the top 3 best players of the Bulldogs in that semi-final yesterday. Now, that might not say much to some people, but they kept going. They kept trying. They deserve a kick in the guts as far as, ex-players and that saying, you need to be better. That was shit. Of course. But they attacked the whole team, not one player, not the club for making changes. They know why those changes happen, and just as these people, these fools in this room know. I reckon Gordy may not know. And all media personalities, if they've got a job to do, are sort of doing what they're doing. So I'm not 100% critical of the why they're doing it. I'm critical of the morality of them doing it. And for Dogs fans to understand that this germ called Philip Rothfield, which is what he is. He's a germ. To listen to him now talk about the comparison between the Sharks, a team that's been making finals for 6 years, it's built its roster gradually. They've got a cohesive and belief across their whole team, across the park. And Dogs fans will go, oh, but we beat them without Burton and we beat them in round 6, blah, 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 blah. Well, there's a team that's timed its run well and versus a team that was build up to bank points early in the season, and we did ambush them. We produced some stuff they didn't expect, and we got to a lead, and they had a bit of bad luck. Lost their centre and their backup centre as a big deal. The Dogs have lost centres in the last 2 weeks. Okay? The last 3 weeks, actually. Losing Bronson Cherry, then he can't play against the Storm, causes disruption. If that doesn't happen, Sexton doesn't come into the side, right? They had to bring Sexton in because they needed to have some cover there. That's why it happened. Just like Mahoney and Sexton playing this week was because Critter was out, and it's a domino effect. Okay, well, instead of bringing in another centre, we lost Anari Tuala. If Tuala's playing, there's a chance him and Renikama are in that side, and Sexton or Mahoney aren't in that team. Okay? They've gone with a player who was given Centre of the Year years ago. He's one of our best sixers. He got exploited in defence yesterday. They let that young halves go out there and have a go. The coach isn't going to sit there and say to a team at any point that they can't win. He's not going to sit there to try and play to the media expectation or the fan base and say, oh, really, we're not going to be able to win because we're too small. He's going to talk the opposite. And that belief is what got them into the position that they got into. But before we play this, here's some context. Origin that no one accounted for. You know, you can't hang shit on Serrato when he's sitting there helping to turn players like Jacob Preston, Jacob Carraz, Max King and Kurt Mann into Origin players. Right? They weren't Origin players anywhere else. And we've had to develop those players. And that's why players like Leo Thompson want to join our club, because they want to be able to go to that level. Okay? Because they know that there's a coach that can do it. And we could sit there and attack their defensive system. We could attack whatever it is about the team at this time of year. All teams are busted. You know, the disruptions had no bearing on the finals. Yeah, we might have won a final, but beating the Raiders or the Roosters or the Sharks or the Broncos, you know, isn't the same as having to beat the Storm or the Panthers. And who's to say that, you know, most predicted the Storm would have finished first, which meant we would have went to the Raiders and had to play them at Canberra. Okay? The Panthers lost a couple of games on the way home, which cost them a top 4 spot. They lost to the Storm and the Raiders as well. But none of those teams beat Penrith yesterday. Not with their best 17. And whilst they've got some vulnerabilities, so what? But the lack of context in this discussion, luckily Brent Reed's there to actually, you know, he defends Isaac Moses at the end of the day. And to keep getting the stories and whatever else. And he's playing good cop, as he should. For him, it's natural for ex-footballers to say there's disruption, okay? Not a problem there. But it's not the story. The story is that with Lachlan Galvin, they lost to one team out of the 8, and the other losses were against sides in the 8 who finished top 8 with Galvin there. All the wins we had were against the Warriors, and we beat Manly, who were on the verge of the 8. Cost them a top 8 spot, really, at the end of the day. Everyone else that we beat was outside of the 8 while Galvin was there. And it was the same for Sexton. With Sexton, we beat the Roosters, which were finished in the top 8, and we beat the Raiders. Everyone else was outside of the 8. So, comparatively, it's the same story. The team had too many disruptions as it was that they didn't probably think they were going to get. They probably accounted for losing Critter and for losing Burton potentially. But to lose King and Carraz and Preston, well, we didn't lose Preston to Origin, but he was out for 4 weeks during Origin. Salmon was out after the Raiders win for 8 or 9 weeks, and he was really important for us early with his defence. See, there's all these reasons here. We had to bring in new players that needed to get surgery and held it off, such as Montoya and Cherry. Tupanua out for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and we saw how good he was for us. So they had to sort of rest man to get him through after his big workload with Origin and everything else. So all these things had to be managed by the club, but there's no context with this. No context with this. You'll get Brent Reed talking about it here. Well, Critter was out. That's why they brought Reed Mahoney back in, because Sexton was on the bench. And he came into the side. Like, Burton moved to centre. It was just a domino effect. Reed Mahoney doesn't probably play in the semi-final, if that's the case. Right? It was the next man up mentality. Losing Critter, the best defensive centre in the game. And how many line breaks did we make once Mitch Kenny went off? Numerous. You know, so the game against Penrith, obviously, Serrato says at the end, we are a middle short. And by being a middle short, he means a quality middle that can play long minutes, that can make their tackles, get back in the line, and hold up the middle and win the ruck, win the contact. Leo Thompson is a player that will help do that. He's not going to be the be-all and end-all, though. What it comes down to is there's just no context about the way we have to play in order to be in with a chance. And you take out our best defensive centre out of our team, and you take the best player out of the Panthers side, and they've probably got between Leota, Edwards probably the least effective this year, but he did some things yesterday that got no attention, where he's literally come into the line and made tackles that were really important and helped with the effort to put us under the back, to slow us down, stuff like that. But Moses Leota, Isaiah Yeo and Nathan Cleary, and add Mitch Kenny to that now, in attack and defence, they're the major parts of their team that they need to be firing. And then you add to that your Liam Martins and whoever else. And obviously Brian To'o's big out of the back end. They've got it across the park. But you take Mitch Kenny or Nathan Cleary out of their side and they struggle to win games. You know why? Because those players are instrumental to what they do. Now, people can talk about Reid Mahoney being that sort of player. Over 50, 60 minutes, he can be. But there was a big shift in some of the stuff he did. The Broncos game, he ran out of the line. He ran out of the line yesterday plenty of times. He went against the system. He went one out and was ineffective. There was times where he held his ground and he smashed guys as well yesterday, where it was fantastic. I seen him dump Payne Huss this year, James Fisher-Harris, Moses Leota a couple of times. Those things are all important in the scheme of things. But there's reasons why these players weren't there, and it has nothing to do with ego, about Serrato being arrogant, all this bullshit that because they want the Canterbury fan base to kick out our board. They don't want a thriving Canterbury and Western Sydney team. Some of these people in the media are disgraceful humans. That they need easy headlines, they need lazy headlines, and most people are happy to jump on it because the algorithm works for that. And I know people will say, oh, but this is my opinion. Yeah, great, have your opinion. But don't ever talk about mental health when you're going to direct it at one kid. And then to change tact and go at Serrato and Gus. They had an opportunity to bring a better player into our squad that's going to develop and be a better player for us. Toby Sexton has never taken a game on like Galvin tried to yesterday. Never. He's never been involved in 3 line break assists and 2 try assists in one match. Never. Well, not against a good team anyway. He goes looking for someone else to do that. I don't like criticising players, but he's now a French Catalan. Thank you for his service. I love Sexy, It was a bit of a lucky charm and provided what we needed. But the club saw the deficiencies for this time of year. Okay? They saw that. They needed to build for that. They needed lessons to be learnt for that. And that's what's happened for our young guys. They've got, experience you just can't buy. But what these guys in NRL360 did this year is nothing short of disgraceful. Braithen Astor, we'll talk about him in a moment, but look, let's watch and listen to Buzz Rothfield.
I was a bit disappointed in Cameron's press conference yesterday when he spoke about the crap that's been in the media, the commentary around all the changes he's made and the unsettling effect it's had on his football side. And absolutely no self-reflection, absolutely no respect for anyone who was even challenged him on. You go through it all. Sexton was the first to be dropped. Then Galvin came into the side. Then Mahoney got dropped. And then Bailey Haywood got dropped. You know what happened yesterday? Sexton came back into the side. Galvin moved to 5'8", but we all know he was best suited.
Well, Steve White was out, Buzz. I mean, that was why the changes took place.
What do you mean? What about Reid Mahoney coming back?
Yeah, well,
Reid Mahoney was sacked and then Reid Mahoney was bringing back.
Yeah.
What I want to compare it to is a settled side like Cronulla. They've had Blake Brayley up front. They've had Hines.
For 4 years.
They've had
For 4 years. For 4 years.
So settled.
for 4 years.
He made too many changes. The players were confused. They lacked cohesion. Their defence even fell apart.
4 years.
yesterday.
It's hard to argue that it hasn't had an impact on the club and their team. The way they were tracking, I know that you were going to argue and you can argue all you like, but from my opinion, just looking at it and
We'll talk about Braith.
Yesterday, you're kind of confused, and you don't. When they made so many changes and went in so many different directions.
What would you have had them do differently yesterday, can I ask? Because Crichton was out, so the best option was to move Burton to the centre.
I'm not even talking
play
yesterday.
Galvin.
No, it's not even talking about yesterday.
You guys keep going back to mid-year, right? Can I say round 16? I looked at these raw today. For the first 16 rounds, they had 2 buys that played 4 top 8 teams. In hindsight, 4. They had a soft draw.
So they're soft.
No, I'm saying they had a soft draw. So where they were false leaders at that point, because they had a soft draw.
Leaders.
Yeah.
You weren't saying that at the time.
Well, if you remember, I said they couldn't win the comp.
Brady, I've got to give
I
you
said that all year, Braith, all year. I said they couldn't win the
You got
comp.
something like this.
And they need to make some they need to make changes. And
Brady, you
we saw
reckon
yesterday
that draw
why
was
those
soft?
changes
You
were
reckon
made.
that draw was
Well, I
soft?
can take you through that.
The last, no,
I'll take you through
let me
that.
take you through this. The last 6 weeks, they won 1 game out of 6. 1 game. You know that was against a reserve grade Penrith side without 16 players, right?
Yep.
So all these changes he made did not work. There is the proof, okay? I don't need it.
So Buzz said in the last 6 weeks of the comp, they won 1 game. And what he's not going to mention is, so Brent Reid makes a point that I made. That in the first 16 rounds, they beat the Roosters, they beat the Raiders. They were the only top 8 teams that they beat. As in, so when he said they had 4 wins against top 8 top position, that was when they were in the 8, but they never made the 8. Only 2 teams that they beat in the first 16 rounds made the 8. And that's just the reality. But round 21, the Bulldogs beat Manly 42-4, and Buzz flipped on what he said. The following week, they lost to the West Tigers 28-14. Bottom 8 team. The next week, they beat the Warriors. Okay? Round 23. Top 8 team. So they beat a bottom 8 team. They lost to a bottom 8 team, then they beat a top 5 team, a team that come 5th. Round 24, we then lost to the Roosters that came 8th. And we talked about that game. Max King with the mould and people with sick with COVID. And there's a lot more to it. Injuries for players that are permanent. They then lost to the Storm in round 25 by 6 points. And we'll go to the stats. Ended up getting 54% possession in the end. Smashed them in run meters. 10 line breaks to 3. They cheated in the ruck all night. We're making, first half, they led 12-0. Okay? Second half, we won that by 14 points to 8. And we were ripped off, essentially. We crossed the line 6 times as well. As far as I'm concerned, that's a moral victory. But it was a loss. At the end of the day, it's a loss. So Buzz is technically right to get to stick the boot in. But they lost to a team, one of the best sides in the comp. The Panthers lost that week to the Raiders 20-16. In a game which they had a big lead. They also lost to the Storm the week before. In a game which they had a big lead. Which is why they then had to rest their players, having gone golden point 2 weeks in a row. And Buzz yet again kicking the boot in. Okay? Round 27, we lost to his Sharks, who did a really good job and proved why they are a premiership threat. And all credit to them. And you go to the team stats on that. They had 55% possession. They completed 44 from 46, yet they were only able to score 4 tries to 1. Scoring in the 25th, 31st, 37th and 57th minute. And the Dogs, apparently from a slow player, scored a length of the field try. Defence, they missed 35 tackles to our 37, even though they had so much more possession. They didn't really throw much at us. They just focused on getting through their sets. And things are very similar. They won the ruck that day, though. They did win it, even though we won, only finished 100 metres behind them. It wasn't that comprehensive. But you're talking about a team list of William Kennedy, Sione Katoa, Jesse Ramian, Kel Iro, who's had the least amount of time in that side. Daniel Atkinson has been 18th man nearly every week. He's going to the Dragons on good money as a half. And they've had their other guy playing 6 has been doing a really good job. Adfanor Blake, Toby Rudolph, Teague Wilton, fantastic edge back rower. Jesse Colquhoun, been developing him for years. Talakai, Hazelton, Hamlin Ueli, Oregon Confuci. How long have they had these middles that have been building their minutes and ability to play? And look, Braden Hamlin Ueli has lost a heap of weight. Looks fitter than he's ever been after numerous knee injuries. They've kept this guy. The Warriors offered that guy $700,000 to go to their club. This is a team that's been building and building and building. And let's have a look. Where did the Sharks finish? They finished top 4 last year, lost the first week. They then went and beat the Cowboys in the second week, and then they went out got flogged by the Panthers in a prelim. 2023. They finished outside the 8. I think they came 5th, and they were out in the first match. And who's the other teams that are there? Roosters, Warriors, Panthers, Broncos. Very familiar top 8 to what's happened this year. And we'll even go back to 2022. Where'd the Sharks finish? That's right. They finished top 4 and were bundled out in straight sets. Weren't they? Exactly. And did they make it in 2021, I wonder? No, they didn't. They missed out in 2021. The Titans made it in the COVID year. I think they made the finals in 2019 and 2020, finishing in 8th spot, and lost their first final. So they've been building for Christ knows how many years to be in the position to now be in a prelim again for, I think they made it last year as well. They've gradually built, and they've had the same spine each time. So I will go back to the prelim last year. What was their side? Who was their team? Will Kenny, Sione Katoa, Kael Iro, Siosifa Talakai, Ronaldo Mulatalo, Braden Trindle, and Nico Hines. Those players are in their side this year. Who else? Rudolph, Blake Brayley, Oregon Confuci, Britton Nakora is back, Teague Wilton. The only player they're missing from last year's team that made the prelim is Cameron McGuinness due to injury. Jack Williams went to the Eels. Royce Hunt went to the West Tigers. They've still got Hazelton and they've still got Atkinson. Marween Harodi been playing in recent weeks. Billy Burns was in their system. Yes, stability is part of it, but without context. What the fuck is Buzz talking about? And who's in the grand final? The two teams that beat the Bulldogs and who have been... So who made the prelim in 2023? Now, Melbourne didn't do that well in 2022, but they still made the finals. 2021, they make the prelim. 2020, they win the grand final. 2019, they make the prelim. 2018, they lose the grand final. 2017, they win the grand final. So you're talking about the Bulldogs had to play the Roosters, the Storm, the Panthers, and the Sharks, teams that have made prelims, grand finals, the last grand finals winners, all those teams in the run home. Yet Buzz is talking as if a player, Toby Sexton, who no one in the NRL wanted, is somehow to be compared with $1 million player who won Dally M Player of the Year. I know he's been absolutely maligned in the media as well, which is wrong. A team that's the same team as last year pretty much, that was almost the same team the year before, have been able to keep stability around their roster and build off a platform that they've built over quite a period of time, that they've maintained even since they won a grand final. Yeah, they missed the finals a couple of times and they've finished in 8th spot and whatever else, but they had the foundations there and they've continued to build on those foundations and stuck to their process. And that is why we got players like Connor Tracy, why we've now got Cade Dykes. You know, those sort of players had a lot of bad luck with injuries and just couldn't cement a spot due to the stability of their team. And the Dogs have picked up players like that, second best players, fringe players. And our coach has helped turn those players into a top 3 team against... We get to finals week 1. %48 possession. 12 less sets. They make 100 extra meters. They did get... I think they got an intercept as well. You know, 6 line breaks to 2. We lost our captain after 10 minutes. We didn't have Bronson Cherry. These are the reasons why we had to bring Sexton back, why we had to bring players back into our team as next man up. No context given though. And really, at the end of this game, we felt we should have won it. Disgraceful decisions. The Nick Mahoney penalty goal wasn't a high tackle. Jonah Prezet did a great job. Well done. But they want to make it about Galvin. And then they basically demanded that Serraldo had to play. So Buzzers had to sit there and go, okay, and now he's put Toby back, and now he's put Reed back, and they got flogged by the best team of a generation. This is what they wanted. And Galvin played really well. Yeah, they can't help themselves. They can't help themselves. Rather than just talk up the Panthers, they just talk down the Bulldogs, who lost to Melbourne, in Melbourne, and then lost to the Penrith. Now, what if we finish second? If we keep Toby and we won a couple more games, maybe we finish second. Okay, we get that game at a core. But who's to say we didn't lose players and have injuries and whatever else? Like, it's all hearsay. Because they want to kick the Bulldogs and they want the Bulldogs fans to kick the club. Buzz can't stand the fact that the Bulldogs are so commercially successful when he knows the Sharks are always at risk in that department. Just based on the fact that they just don't have the facilities and the numbers. And they know Canterbury doesn't have a big junior base as well. But the main part is he hates Phil Gould. So there's your context. Look at this grommet. Absolute alcoholic, disgraceful human. Who's going, oh, they won 1 out of their last 6 games. Okay. But again, I just went through who they lost against and who they beat. They lost to the Panthers, the Storm, who are now both in prelims. They lost to the Sharks, who are in a prelim. They lost to the Roosters, who the Sharks knocked out of to get a chance at the Raiders. The only team we beat were the Roosters earlier in the year, when we had a lot going for us. They didn't have Sam Walker at the time, by the way. We were confident. And we beat the Sharks earlier in the year, who have built into this season. The other side that's in the top 4 and in a prelim beat us twice. And they beat us with Galvin, in an origin-affected game for both teams. And the Dogs led them by 18 points at one point. We let that game slip. But that's what happens. And you're talking about a side that went in a whisker for winning a grand final in 2023, who have got 80-minute Australian players in Huss and in Carrigan, who's got Adam Reynolds, grand final winners, Ben Hunt, Origin Australian player, winner, grand finalist a couple of times. Reece Walsh. All these wonderful players, Katoni Staggs, that have had to beat the best of the best to get their job at the Broncos. And still they don't give the Dogs any credit for being in the conversation with the type of players. And this guy's tried to say, oh, poor Max King. He's only on half of what they're going to pay Leo Thompson. And look at the Knights, they got the wooden spoon. I guess he wasn't talking about Uwe Tikamanu going to Melbourne for 800 grand or 900 grand from the wooden spoon and West Tigers. Was he? No problem with that. But Thompson apparently is not good enough. He's not going to help us. Look, he might do an ACL. He might not help us at all. That happens. You can only do your best and buy what's out there. And it's not like we could have gone out and bought 80-minute players in the middle and kept our salary cap discipline and give us a chance to compete and build the way we have. We've dominated the Dragons, the Knights, the Eels. Got a couple of wins over the Sharks in our last 3 games. It come from the clouds. Start dominating the Titans now. Had a good win over Brisbane last year. Got Manly back this year. Beaten the Warriors the last 3 times we've played them. The club is making progress. Beat the Roosters twice out of the last 4 times we've played them. Perennial top 4, top 5, top 6, top 7, top 8 teams. Beat the Raiders. Runner-up in 2019. Made finals quite a few times. Minor premiers this year. There's so many green shoots to the Bulldogs, yet this dickhead is allowed to go out there and spew lies and spew perceptions that don't provide the context that is required of a journalist of his experience, all because he just wants to dig the boot in.
Any other statistical
So, Reddy, are you saying that because they didn't think they could win, or you didn't think they could win the comp, you're okay with what's happening?
Yes, because I think in the long run they're going to be a better team as a result of the changes they made.
Do you think they thought that?
I think they thought they could
that's just my opinion, and I'm happy for them to prove me wrong. When you said that the halfback's not good enough, you tell all the other players that you're not good enough to win the comp. So if I'm there and I'm a back row and I'm Preston and I'm kick out and I'm Stephen Crichton and I've got to bring in an 18-year-old kid, right, that's wet beyond the ears to win the competition, I'm embarrassed. Because they were on top of the table. And you can say it's soft. You can only beat who you play against. And I thought that. And in hindsight, if they're honest, don't blame me. I wouldn't have made that decision, and they shouldn't have.
I think that's why like ex-players can speak to this situation better. And I'm not saying that you guys don't have valid points and opinions, but as ex-players, and you talk to a lot of ex-players about this current situation, I said it at the time. It's not so much the decision you're making; it's the impact it's going to have on the team and your teammates going through what a few of them had to go through. And they played it down and said that the team was happy the whole time. The teammates were on board. Well, of course you're on board. You listen to your coach. You believe in your coach, and you do all year. But you know, bubbling underneath the surface, there's a bit of uncertainty. It's like, do they not think we can win the comp with the group we've got? We're coming first. Do they not think that this guy and he can do the job that needs to be done?
Mahoney, we interviewed him on Triple M. How emotional he was and cried about when he got to the place to when he left the place. That's the guy. So now, if I'm sitting, you need to where people when you sit in the dressing room, I would like to have played with a guy. And you know, yeah, he gives away penalties, but he gives away our penalties. Because he got in front of guys. He was trying to make things happen yesterday. So they're the things that I see.
I understand what you're saying. But he was trying to win a comp. That's why he made the change.
But that's why I'm calling it out now, Brady. That's why I waited until now to say he was wrong. And I'll ask you this. I'll ask you one more question. Did he err in playing Lachlan Galvin at halfback and ask him to run that football side rather than at 5'8", where we all knew he was much more comfortable, as was shown yesterday afternoon at Core Stadium?
We played for that yesterday and they got flogged.
Okay.
Flogged.
No, but
And Tony Sexton had.
he had his best
Quite
game.
game.
He had his
He was
best game.
Lachlan Galvin was their best player with Jacob Preston.
Well, mate,
That's
yeah,
why I say, you know, and you can't admit it, he should not have been picked at halfback to run that side.
Well, at the top.
So, Lachlan Galvin was the halfback yesterday. He had the 6 on his back, but he played halfback. See, this is where, you know, and Brafe's talking about ex-players. Yeah, of course. I actually don't mind that point he raised. Does he think we can't win the comp? The context of the matter is, he didn't think that they could win the comp with Toby Sexton and Reid Mahoney because of shit that happened with both of those players during the year. There's still a genuine care for those blokes, and the playing group's got genuine care for each other. And they're mates for life. But trust is also important, and the only trust that matters is from within the walls. And of course, they're going to listen to their coach and have that belief. They have to have it. And as soon as they don't have it, they're gone. But they lost to teams, for the most part. So when Galvin was there, they lost to sides that have made the top 4. In fact, or have made the top 4 consistently over the last few years. They're the teams that they lost to, and only the Roosters really smashed us. And that game yesterday, we got smashed in the first half. You can talk about the Cronulla game. They had enough ball to win 14 matches. Okay, and they score 4 tries and 3 line breaks. Like, seriously, come on. No context. Brent Reed's trying his best to do it there. If I was there and was allowed to speak, I'd get a much better point across. But they don't want context. Reed's trying to provide it because it gives something to the fans to sort of say, okay, well, our points are heard there. And Gordy believes what he believes, and that's Gordy. He's always going to believe what he believes. I've got no problem with that. Buzz knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how... It's like someone trying to sell you statistics to validate their existence. And a player like Buzz Rothfield goes about that in a certain way for his advertisers. And all the headlines that are going to be created from this from this broadcast today, Fox and Zero Tackle and a whole bunch of places are going to bounce on that. A whole bunch of podcasters are going to say, yeah, and use these opinions that are being created to justify. When you're a coach of a team and you change out an A-grade hooker who basically, hasn't got the ability to go 80 minutes in the big games and hold it together, who's proven that point numerous times, in what he's got to do in a game. There's things that happen, and there's reasons that they make these things. So as these ex-players, it'd be way more pertinent for them to say, actually, look, Cameron Ciraldo, he's obviously a great coach. You can see with the way that he's getting things through, the way that he's getting players developed into being from average or fringe, or from raw and new into players that can make other teams. But even I'll ask you this now: where does Max King and Josh Curran and even our Harry Hayes and Bailey Haywood, would the Cowboys want Reid Mahoney if they still had Reece Robson? Of course not. You go put these players against the top four lineups that have made the prelim, for example, and tell me how many of these players in the Bulldogs squad are getting picked in these 17s. I'm not trying to undersell our players. I wouldn't swap them for the world. But the point of the matter is that none of these ex-players and none of these people are picking Sexton as their halfback. They're probably all picking Fogarty ahead of Sexton. They're picking, Trindle, and they're picking all of these players ahead of the Bulldogs halves. Burton gets in a team, yeah. But where does Burton play at Melbourne? He plays in the centres. They pick him in the centres. Because Munster plays 6. Right? At Penrith, he plays 6. At Brisbane. Interesting. So you get rid of Ben Hunt, you still got Ezra Mam. Is it, maybe Mam goes to half and they channel Reynolds out the door if they get a Burton. And the Sharks, is it Burton or Trindle? They probably keep Burton over Trindle, or they move Burton into the centres, where they've got 2 really good centres, good defensive centres. Roosters. How many players from the Bulldogs are getting picked in top 8 teams? Seriously, tell yourselves that. And then answer that question honestly. And then sit there and tell me, did the Bulldogs underachieve or overachieve this year? Now, they have to have belief they can win. And being in first position, having had most of their buys by the time Galvin got there, having only mainly played top 8 teams on the run home, was it really that bad of a performance, considering we should have beat Melbourne in Melbourne and then nearly beat them again, losing our captain that early? Come on. You can't tell me any of that. Oh, Mahoney stays in the team and we do better. Maybe. I thought starting Mahoney was the right thing to do yesterday, and Bailey Haywood come on for 50 minutes afterwards, didn't miss a tackle. He had one forward pass down the short side, so fucking what? He's trying to chase a game of rugby league. He's trying to chase a score. We had a kid with a 6 on his back who had 60 touches compared to 40-something for the kid with a 7 on his back. Who's the team trust? Toby or Galvin? Burton had 22 touches yesterday. I don't care what Gordy says. Gordy can say what he wants. But what Braith knows, Braith and Aston knew there was no plans for Sexton. He never ever got fully behind Sexy. I think he liked Sexy. You know, he thought he was doing a pretty good job. Statistically, not there. And they were happy to present that information. Very happy to present that information, they were. It was leaked by a Dogs fan. Okay. Very happy to present that and talk Galvin up for a little bit. But as I told everyone, they were going to milk every last bit out of Lachlan Galvin, and that's exactly what they've done. And it's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. And the fans of Canterbury, many of those fans have played into it. But I will say there's a whole bunch who don't say nothing and don't watch these shows and don't play into it. They just watch their team on the weekend and support their players and support their club. And we don't win, they go better luck next year. But there's a whole bunch who honestly thought Toby Sexton was worth $1 million. They must have thought that. And hopefully one day he is worth that much. He was worth $1 million over 2 years to Catlanes, but not to any other team in the comp. It's about salary cap. It's about the way things are handled. And sometimes, and it's about whether a player can develop and what they can see in a player. They got Mitchell Woods there. They want to bring him in as soon as they can and get his journey under the way. They're going to have some real depth in behind him as far as talent goes. They got Galvin there now. If he puts some weight on, will find himself as a 13 or a 6. But they brought him here because they knew that he could offer a different sort of attack at different times. And whilst it didn't necessarily work out against the best side, so what? They showed that they could go toe-to-toe with them. And even with the Penrith Panthers yesterday, once we got parity in the ruck and got a little bit of, leeway like the Panthers got the whole game, we were able to exploit their weaknesses as they exploited ours. But, the Dogs will continually develop bigger forwards that are mobile and can play longer minutes. They'll find that player, which is probably Galvin, that turns into that Isaiah Yeo type player or that Cameron Murray type player. Obviously, he's got to get his defence right, but Yeo started on the wing, for fuck's sake. It's his dedication to his craft has made him one of the most important 13s in the comp. Now, it's not the same in Origin because Cameron Murray's a better 13 at Origin level the way it's refereed. When they change the way it's refereed, that makes them the same. But they're both great 13s. And the Dogs need that. The Dogs need a Carrigan or a Yeo. Right now we have a Salmon and a Man. And that costs us 3 interchanges at least per match. You get one player to replace those two and look what you have. You suddenly can carry an extra forward. And that's what will happen with the Dogs. That's where it'll evolve. And that's where the Dogs of War will be seen. Because they will tackle the same way in packs. They won't have that line bent the same way. They'll bend the line more when they're in possession. They'll play off the front foot a lot more. And good teams will suddenly succumb to them. Does that happen next year, though? I doubt it. Will Leo, if we can keep a fit Leo Thompson, a fit Satili Tupanua, a fit Max King, and keep those other players raring to go fit, yeah, we can do some damage. We can play off the front foot. Players like Galvin can do a job. But these guys are going to talk us up like we should finish top 4. Oh, is Hayward and Galvin going to take those steps? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, maybe they should have kept Sexton and Mahoney. They're not going to end. They're not going to stop. And it won't matter who the Dogs play or when they play them. Any loss will be treated the same way. They're not going to stop this. Not when you've got a Braith and Astor who wanted his player to play at the Dogs and we rejected it. Twice. He knows how good Cameron Serrato is a coach. He knows that for sure. So Buzz reckons Cameron was supposed to go out there and stop what he was doing. He was supposed to go out there and reflect and apologise. Oh yeah, like that would have changed anything. Like that would have made you guys, Paul Crawley saying he needs to apologise. Fuck off. What a fucking tosser. Creepy Crawley, who had that fucking article written 6 weeks ago. Who had an article written about getting rid of Kyle Flanagan in 2023. In week 1 or 2. Oh, they beat Melbourne, maybe. Wow. Oh, now they've beaten Wests. I'll hold off. Oh, they lost to the Warriors in New Zealand, who finished 4th, by the way, that year. By 2 points. Oh, okay. 5 minutes after the result, bang. Why the Bulldogs must get rid of Kyle Flanagan. And whilst many fans might agree, it's just another attack on the club, telling them that they don't have the right halfback and they need to go find one. And as soon as they find someone with some talent who can take them further, none of them was sold on Toby Sexton, including Phil Rothfield. He was Reid Marnie's biggest detractor until the Galvin story was there and there was an opportunity to attack Phil Gould. And if people can't see that, they've got their eyes painted on and their ears are full of fucking gunk. If you can't see that, when you got Hooper, who no longer has a job there, the biggest spinster the game's ever seen, talking about the players mocking Galvin when he said he was leaving. Like it's just been one big shit pile on. I told everyone that they were going to continue to do it. And if we didn't win the comp, it was going to be Galvin's fault. Or the coach's fault for putting him in there. And look at their thing. Losing trust. Bulldogs debate reignites. Who is to blame for the straight sets exit? Let's finish listening to these bozos.
Brady, their attack, when I come in first, they were fifth in the comp.
I just told you they're draw, bro.
They were 15th.
I just told you they're draw.
They were 15th in attack.
I'll take you through their play, mate. Do you want me to take you through their play?
Oh, you put me to sleep,
Yeah.
as you normally do. But it's so
And then,
you think he was 100% confident?
and then the mocking technique. So Brent Reed's about to sit there and basically do what I did for 30 minutes. He'd be able to do it in 1 minute. Because I'm not a professional. These guys supposedly are. They get mocked. They've got 3 against 1. And that's how they work it. Always. 3 against 1. And sometimes they ambush Buzz so that they can make him the 1 when he thinks he's in the 3. Which is hilarious.
The decisions he's made, he's happy with the ones he's made. He's got no regrets whatsoever.
He didn't sound to me as though he's a guy's got regrets about his decisions he's made.
Going there yesterday was one of the greatest days, and you wish that the Bulldogs fans would have won. Like it was a special day to see the crowd rock in, and if they won, like next week it would have been bigger, right?
They missed 42 tackles at half time.
Yep.
42. So would they have missed 42 tackles and not coming first?
Well, Brad, I'm not Nostradamus, I can't tell you. But as I said, the periods this year when they're coming first, they got flawed a couple of times when they're coming first.
Can you not understand the confusion in that football side when Mahoney's in 1 week, 3 weeks from the bench, sacked, Bailey Haywood has 3 weeks, sacked,
I just
Reid
told you
Marnie's
what
back in.
happened. I just told you what happened.
Look, I'm sorry, I didn't listen all that carefully. Because you didn't
Because Steve Crichton was out. They made the change because Steve Crichton was out. So Billy went to the centres.
Hold on.
That man changed their halves.
Hookers when you lose the centre. Now don't go on with that rubbish. You don't change hookers when the centre
Well,
pulls
they
out.
did. You were calling for Reid Marnie to be the team. Now you're saying they shouldn't have brought Reid Marnie in because it confused everyone.
No, you see,
I'm confused by you.
No, you're making this up now. I
you
suggested at the start of the year that Reid Marnie, right, needed to get the rubbish out of his game. He did. He should have stayed in the football side. He's extremely popular with the players. You know he is. And Bailey Haywood, the week before, your hooker missed 13 tackles.
So they
That's
brought
why
him
he
back
got
in.
dropped.
yesterday, Rudy. Look at the defensive reads on the edges.
Look at the board. Look at the teams that they're playing in the background where the Dogs were, where they're showing the Bulldogs doing really well.
No idea. They were not working as a unit. 42 missed tackles means that you are not playing as a team. And you're not playing as a team because the team has changed so much over a long period of time that you actually end up losing belief and trust in each other because you don't know who you're playing next to. Like, how could you sit here and say that those big, significant decisions of a team coming first with a chance to win a competition, whether you think they could have or not, has not led to a team now that was losing 36 points to 8 at half-time in the final?
I think what we saw yesterday was
Their spine, Reedy.
what about their spine?
Well, it's their spine, the most key, the 4 key positions.
You wanted Sexton back in that team. You wanted Mahoney back in that team. How did they play yesterday?
Do you
How did the team
think
play yesterday?
their confidence might have been shattered in the manner in which they were treated round 19 than
There wasn't
round
one goal.
23?
Maybe Preston was the best dog.
Preston and Galvin were the two
They
best
were
Bulldogs
yesterday. They
players.
were. You know what? They looked tired
Hey,
and
really,
relieved that the year's
really,
over.
you
That's
know
what
that
they looked like
decision?
to me.
Do you think the Daly Cherry Evans decision hurt Manly?
Well, I've said on here it did, yes.
Yeah, okay, so the Galvin decision hurt the Bulldogs. Just stay consistent.
Okay.
Okay, so what happens now with the Dogs? What happens now? Well, we're moving on to next year. What do?
They need some big forwards, Braith.
Big
They
forwards,
need to strengthen
I
the
agree
middle of the field because they got steamrolled at times this year. So they obviously
Leo Thompson
Thompson's
coming,
coming.
yeah.
They need more than Leo Thompson for me.
Okay.
I know the King tried hard yesterday. He was just a bit small. But then, but Penrith have done that to a lot of sides.
I think Mitch Woods comes in at halfback.
So you're going to play Mitch Woods at half?
Galvin plays 6.
Yeah.
Burton goes to the centres.
Who's the other centre?
Shuffle it
Crichton?
around. Well,
happens-
let's Crichton plays fullback because
Oh, you think that's a chance?
well, I think it has to be a chance.
So,
I think it has to be a chance because I think Connor Tracy, as good as he is, and as a really
You think he
solid
might be
first
the
grader,
forward?
I think Steve Crichton's elite. And the more you can get the ball
So
in
do
his
you
hands,
Do you
maybe
think,
like-
Reedy, and I know you're particularly tight with Cameron, the Bulldogs, the way you're splitting,
I'm not tired of them at all.
did they err in letting Alamotti go to Penrith? No, what do you mean, come on, local junior, Milpericol?
Where's he getting that team on the wing or
Oh,
where you got him?
he
don't know.
walks into the, he walks
He
in.
would have walked onto the wing yesterday.
I would have
He was walking on
scored
those wings.
3 tries in the wing from Penrith.
Oh, right of the year. Right of the year.
I'm not sure about that.
He's a good player. I'm not denying that. But at the time, he was banging the Dogs and he's gone.
So you would have scored that try?
No, that one I probably wouldn't.
Okay.
The other big thing about Canterbury yesterday, with all these changes, excuse me, they put Matt Burton in a position where he can't use that burning boot. And Galvin did all the kicking yesterday, and with Burton, he was hurt at training last Thursday night. He did his AC in his shoulder. He went into the game with painkiller injections. But mate,
Burns kicked the centre this year. Burns playing the centre.
He kicked the start of the game. He's doing a lot of long kicks.
He can kick the ball in the centre.
Galvin, I think, was feeling it, and he was in a bit of a mood yesterday. Was playing some good footy, so he took over, which I thought was good.
And there you go. That's enough from those bozos. So that's it. There's some points that have, you've. Of course, there was some. There'd be questions in the group. But the point I kept making is that the group had an influence on the group. And there was dissension in the group about the way some players were handling things and brought that into the group. And that gets all sorted out because they are good mates and whatever else. But there was noise outside beforehand. And I'm happy to take points from Braith. But the reason Braith was so dogmatic on this situation, it comes from a few different points. He's an ex-Bulldog. He's an ex-player. But come on, he wears a Roosters jersey around his house. You know, there's not too many. He's not really wearing the Dogs jersey. He knows Cameron Ciraldo's is the real deal. He knows what's right for his players that he manages, and he also knows that it's hard to deny any of the stuff he's talked about. It is. But no one's asked about the mental health of these young players that they've continually put in the spotlight. And as Brent Reid tried to make out on that show, they moved Matt Burton to the centres. And then Buzz says at the end of the show, which I didn't even hear about yet, Matt Burton did his AC joint at training on Thursday. He's under injections. And he's not the only one. There's been numerous in our club that have been needled up, sometimes incorrectly. And that happens. Sometimes you miss the nerve and whatever. All through the season, that shit happens. But this team gave it their all. They didn't look like a disconnected team against the Storm. We lost Cherry in the first 5 minutes the week before, which really puts you under the pump when you lose your centre. How good did the Sharks go against us when KL Hero had to go off in round 6? They couldn't get anything back, and then they lost their replacement centre, so they had to play with 15 players for 40 minutes. Actually, for 50 minutes. It's impossible to win. And we were missing Burton in that day, so we were already behind the 8 ball. But we ambushed them. Round 4, I think. Or round 5. They're not giving context to the fact that our team is slowly got itself ahead of teams in that middle rung. And what were they saying? It was hard to know who was going to be in this top 8 between probably the 15th or 16th side early on, all the way to the 7th or 8th team. And the Dogs managed to beat a majority of those teams in that pack. They went pretty good against the Panthers earlier on. And they went good against the Storm. It's, and who's to say, if we'd beaten the Storm, they just would have talked down the players missing from the Storm. We then would be facing the Sharks in a prelim, and we'd be every chance of beating them. But to be honest, in my gut, I would have felt, I would have been talking it up, but I would have felt really fucking scared, because I know what the Sharks have been building over a period of time, and I expect them to go out and beat the Storm. If their halfback can hold it together, and players like Trindle and Hines can play football off the back of their forward pack, they should be able to win, because they've got the stability across their whole squad over 4 years. The Dogs have got fringe players from their team as important players in our club now. Like, these guys have no context behind it. They just want to sit there and push the negative and not understand. At least Brent Reid had the foresight to understand that the Bulldogs had to get some better players in there to give himself a chance. Got themselves to the top 4. I've said all the points. It's up to supporters now to get on the bus or get off it, as far as I'm concerned. It's not all going to be fixed next year. And if it is, fucking great coaching performance. I'm happy to sit in the middle and just back these guys to get to where they need to get over a period of time. But I'm not going to sit here and stay silent about blatant and utter misrepresentation of facts, misrepresentation of important detail. That detail comes down to the fact that people like Braith and Astor wear too many hats and struggle to maintain some sort of separation in it. That he could have sat there and said, that was just deplorable yesterday. They need to be better. Oh, they missed 42 tackles. That come down to the fact that the Penrith completed 20 from 20. Their opposition was so good. There was no talk about how good the Penrith Panthers were in that period. Now, I haven't watched the full episode. Maybe they spent 20 minutes talking about how good Penrith were. Instead, they just talked about how shit Canterbury were. And they just wanted to pile on, and Buzz wanted to sit there and say that he won the fight. And it's, if my ego was as bad as him, I'd be death riding the Sharks to lose this week. I actually want them to win. I want them to beat Melbourne, and I want them to go out there and probably beat Penrith. or Brisbane. And Brisbane are a big shot. Tony Staggs will be loving what he saw on that left edge. They've got the balance and experience, that Broncos side, to do something in this match. And Penrith are going to have to play well to win. But if they make the big dance, they're a big chance of going 5 in a row, and everyone knows it. But I think it'll be a Penrith Sharks grand final. Brisbane, Melbourne. I'd hate that, but guess what? Could happen as well. There's a big chance for every team there in this prelim to make the final. Penrith are in the best position, but both these teams, Melbourne and Brisbane, have had 2 weeks off, while these other two teams only get the Panthers get a 7-day break into Brisbane, and the Sharks only got a 6-day break into the Storm. So good luck to those sides, but it's disgraceful what NRL360 and especially Buzz Rothfield has done in regards to the way that he has presented his arguments. The hypocrisy in what he said just needs to be called out. And called out with the context added to it. Oh, suddenly he said Reid fixed his game, did he? Good on Reid for... Look, I've got nothing but usually good things to say about Reid, Mahoney. But yeah, ask the question, why did they drop him? It wasn't to accommodate Galvin. But they brought him back in because he was next man up, and they moved Matt Burton out to the centres. And then Buzz tells you at the end that he had an AC joint problem. But he had to play. Your best players have got to play on the day. That's what has to happen. Oh, it doesn't stop him from doing his kicks, though. Oh, come off it, Buzz. It seems Penrith knew he had a shoulder problem because they fucking went... They targeted him. They knew when he come in to add some spice there. They had Blaze Talangi ready to smash him a couple of times. Maybe the Dogs should have called their bluff and when he come into it, went past him. But anyway, guys, that's this focus on Bulldogs 360 by these grommets like Buzz Rothfield. And I just hope that the Dogs can have a really good off season, have a good rest, and get those young kids up to speed as quickly as possible. But yeah, our spine is still going to evolve, unfortunately. They've got a bit to do, but the good thing is that we do know that Serrato will get a lot of these young guys that have made the cut, and a lot that haven't, unfortunately, will go ply their trade in other places. And all the best to those players that have left. But yeah, there'll be some players that come into our squad that you don't expect as well, who are going to go on to bigger and better things and provide great stuff for the Bulldogs in 2026, which hopefully gets us into that position again with some more stability next year, where they can go on and maybe win a final and beat a side that they've struggled to beat at this time of year. Thanks for watching. Go the Dogs, and thank you very much.